Welcome back to the Frequency 104.9. I'm your host, Silas Thorne. It's 3 a.m., that hour where the city starts to hold its breath. I can feel the chill starting to climb the studio walls tonight. I hope you folks at home are tucked in tight, because we've got another story to tell. And this one? Well, it's got a bit of a kick. So Kenji hit 19 and decided he'd had enough of the static at home. Between a mother who counted his breaths and a father who drowned his days in a bottle, the door was the only thing that made sense. So, he ended up at Speedy Pizza, trading his college dreams for a grease-stained uniform and a boss who treated overtime like a religious obligation. In this economy, you don't complain about the grind. You just be thankful the check clears on Fridays. It wasn't much of a life, but it was his. It was Tuesday. The neon "Open" sign should have been flicked off at 7 p.m., but Kenji found himself lingering. He was nursing a lukewarm soda, dragging a mop across the checkered linoleum just to kill time. Anything was better than the suffocating silence of his studio apartment, or the dread of a surprise visit from his mother.
An order at this hour?
Kenji muttered, wiping his hands on a greasy apron. He picked up the heavy plastic receiver. The voice on the other end didn't sound like a hungry customer. It was thin, like a recording played from a distance, or a signal struggling to break through a storm. He understood the address, Nebula Heights, but the words felt wrong, like they were being shaped by a throat that hadn't used them in years. There was an eerie, rhythmic hum in the background of the call, a steady 60 hertz thrum that made the hair on Kenji's arms stand up. He should have hung up. He should have walked out the back door. But Lou, his grumpy boss, had a rule.
You miss a sale, you miss a paycheck.
Kenji scribbled the address on a torn receipt, grabbed the keys to his beat-up hatchback, and stepped out into the rain. It was only a 10-minute drive, a straight shot past the edge of the city lights. Kenji figured he'd be in and out. But the address led him to the fringe of town, where the asphalt started to crumble, and the streetlights were spaced too far apart. He pulled his white hatchback to the curb in front of a sprawling concrete complex that looked more like a tomb than an apartment building. So he killed the engine, the wipers giving one last screeching swipe across the glass. And Kenji stepped out into the downpour. The rain hit the hot hood of his car with a frantic hiss. He grabbed the grease-stained paper bag, the warmth of the pizza, the only comfort in the dark, and looked around. He started walking toward the back of the complex, his sneakers squeaking on the wet concrete.
Should be this way,
he whispered to himself, his voice sounding thin against the heavy thrum of the rain. The hallway felt like a throat, swallowing him whole. The air here was different, stale, smelling of ozone and old magnetic tape. According to the exterior of the building, this corridor should have ended 50 feet ago. Instead, it stretched on, lit by flickering fluorescent tubes that hummed with a low, aggressive 60 hertz buzz. He adjusted the pizza bag, the warmth of the cardboard now feeling like a dying ember against his chest. He started counting the doors. The numbers were brass, tarnished and crooked. He turned a corner, a sharp 90-degree left that shouldn't have been there. The walls seemed to be leaning in. The silence was so heavy he could hear the blood rushing in his own ears. He took another turn. The carpet changed from stained gray to a sickly, dark maroon. At the dead end of the corridor stood a door that didn't belong in this century. It was thick, dark mahogany, polished to a mirror sheen that caught the sickly flicker of the overhead fluorescence. There was no window, no brass mail slot, no sign of life, just the number. Centered perfectly on the wood was a gold 0. It wasn't the cheap stick-on kind you'd find at a hardware store. It was elegant, with deep-set bevels and a serif font that looked like it belonged on a bank vault or a Victorian manor. It caught the light, gleaming with a soft, expensive glow that felt like a challenge. Unit 0. Kenji stood there, just stood there. His sneakers had soaked through somewhere between Unit 4 and Unit 2, and now he could feel the cold creeping up from the soles of his feet like it was looking for somewhere to settle. The pizza bag had stopped feeling warm. He hadn't noticed when. 3:12 a.m. Do you ever feel like the walls are getting closer, listeners? Like the hallway you're walking down is just a little longer than it was yesterday? Sometimes we take a wrong turn, not because we're lost, but because the road decided to grow a new limb. We're following our passenger, Kenji, to the end of a corridor that shouldn't exist. Don't touch that dial. We're about to find out what's on the other side of 0. This is frequency 104.9. Stay tuned, if you can. So the door swung open on its own. Not fast, not like a jump scare, not like the wind had caught it. Slow and deliberate, the way a person opens a door when they already know who's standing on the other side. The hinges didn't creak. A door this old should have creaked. Instead, it opened in complete silence, which was somehow worse. Kenji didn't move. Not yet. He stood in the doorway and looked in. The room was dark, not the comfortable dark of somewhere lived in and resting, but the specific dark of a place that had never quite decided to be a room at all. The only light came from the far wall. A television. Old, the boxy kind, deep-backed and heavy-looking, its screen churning with white static that threw a cold, restless light across everything it could reach. Which wasn't much. Just the coffee table directly in front of it. Low, walnut veneer, a glass ashtray sitting dead center that nobody had used in what looked like decades, and the edges of 2 couches arranged on either side. Low-slung, wide-armed, upholstered in something that might have been burnt orange once and had since given up. The kind of furniture that had been new sometime in the late 70s and had simply never left. The voice came from inside the dark. "Leave it on the table." Kenji's hand tightened around the paper bag. That voice. He'd heard it 40 minutes ago on the shop phone and told himself it was a bad connection, a dropped signal, rain interference, some glitch in the landline. Now it was here, coming from somewhere inside that static-lit room, and his brain was already running the same excuse. Bad acoustics, high ceilings, old building. He stepped inside. The carpet swallowed the sound of his movement. Thick, patterned, its design impossible to follow even if there had been enough light to see it. The rain behind him dimmed instantly, as if the threshold had cut it away. The door closed at his back. He didn't hear that either. He moved to the table and set the bag down. The pizza was still warm. He could feel the heat through the cardboard, a small, stubborn fact in a room that seemed to want to swallow ordinary things whole. He straightened up, wiped his palms on his coat, and looked around properly for the first time. Empty. Not just quiet. Empty. No coat on a hook by the door, no shoes kicked off by the couch, no glass on the coffee table, no magazine left open and face down. Just the furniture, the wallpaper, the ashtray nobody had touched, and the television. Always the television. He looked at it the way you look at something you've been avoiding looking at. The static rolled across the screen in thick, shifting layers, like something that couldn't hold still. The sound of it filled the room at a frequency just below the threshold of comfort. Not loud, just a present. The way a sound is present when it's been there so long the room has started to shape itself around it.
Hello?
Kenji said. His voice landed flat, swallowed whole. No echo, no answer. The static shifted, not into a picture, nothing so clean as that. More like a lean, a gathering. The white noise from the speaker rose by half a degree in pitch, and Kenji felt it in his back teeth before he heard it change. Then the voice came out of the screen. Thank you for coming. So it emerged from the static without breaking it. Not layered over the noise, not carried by it, formed from it. Kenji felt the cold move through him, slow and precise. The same voice from the phone, but clearer now in a way that had nothing to do with volume. And up close, he could hear what it was made of. Like every word was threaded with that same constant hiss. No, not distortion, composition. The sound wasn't interfering with the voice. It was the voice. It's each syllable assembled from noise, cut cleanly from it, held together just long enough to mean something before dissolving back into the whole. And he stared at the screen. The static shifted again, but still no image, nothing recognizable. But it had direction now, intention. The movement angled toward him, subtle but undeniable, like something turning its attention.
You called the shop.
It's not a question. The words came out flat, already decided. And the hiss responded. But not through language, not quite. There was a change in frequency, a pressure that settled low in his chest. Understood somewhere beneath thought. So he turned toward the door. Closed. But he hadn't seen it close. He hadn't heard it. He crossed the room and grabbed the handle. It turned easily, but the door didn't move. So he pulled harder. Nothing. There was no resistance in the mechanism, no catch, no lock. The resistance was deeper than that, as if the door had ceased to be an object and had become part of the wall itself, as if it had always been that way, and his memory of it opening was the mistake. And behind him, the television continued its steady hiss. Sit down, Kenji. The static pulsed once. The light shifted with it, settling across the room like a held breath finally released. But Kenji realized he hadn't told anyone his name. Kenji didn't sit. He lunged back at the door, his fingers clawing at the mahogany. The brass handle turned, round and round in a sickening, frictionless circle, but the door didn't budge. It didn't even rattle in the frame. It felt like he was pulling on the hull of a ship.
Hey, open the door! Let me out!
He screamed, the sound tearing at his throat. He slammed his fist against the wood. The sound was dull, dead, as if there was nothing but solid stone on the other side. He turned, back pressed against the wood, eyes wide and darting. The room was shrinking. Or maybe it was just the shadows, stretching further as the television's glow pulsed in a slow, hypnotic rhythm.
What do you need from me? I just delivered the food. That's it. Let me out.
The television didn't answer. It didn't shift into words. It didn't lean. It just sat there, a bloated, cream-colored eye pouring white noise into the room. Kenji gritted his teeth. He backed up 2 steps, leveled his weight, and slammed his shoulder into the mahogany. The door felt like solid iron. Again. A sickening crack echoed, not from the wood, but from the joint of his shoulder. But he needed to try one more time. He threw his entire existence into the final blow.
Whoa! Ouch!
The resistance vanished. The door didn't just swing open. It dissolved into the frame. Kenji went sprawling, his momentum carrying him into a violent tumble. He hit the floor hard, the air driven from his lungs in a ragged wheeze. He lay there for a second, cheek pressed against the carpet. He scrambled to his feet, spinning around to look back at the room. But the doorway was gone. There was only a smooth, unbroken stretch of beige wallpaper where the exit should have been. He began to run. The hallway was a nightmare of geometry. Every light fixture flickered in a staggered sequence, making his movement feel jerky, like a frame rate drop in a film. He passed a door on his left, Unit 0. He sprinted harder, each breath a jagged blade of ozone in his chest. He passed another door, Unit 0. Then another. The brass zeros didn't just hang there, they seemed to bulge from the wood, their polished surfaces reflecting a distorted, screaming version of his own face. The hallway was no longer just a corridor. It was an accordion, stretching and compressing with every footfall. He pushed his legs until they felt like lead poured into denim, his eyes locked on the exit, a pinprick of light at the end of a darkening throat. The hiss wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a physical force, a wall of pressurized white noise that vibrated the marrow in his bones. It roared in his ears, drowning out the frantic slap of his sneakers on the carpet. The air grew thick with a sudden, violent charge. The hair on his arms snapped upright, pulled toward the ceiling by an invisible, static current. He could feel it now, a cold, buzzing presence blooming just inches behind his neck. It wasn't just close, it was reaching. It was a frequency he couldn't outrun, a signal finally finding its home. Finally, he burst through a pair of glass doors and into the lobby. He didn't stop to look at the silent, vibrating clock or the empty front desk. He hit the main entrance doors and burst into the humid night air. He reached his car, fumbled the keys, and dove into the driver's seat. Twist. The engine groaned, a hollow metallic click. Twist. Nothing. Just the faint, rhythmic ticking of the cooling metal.
Please. Not now. Not here.
The silence of the parking lot was being replaced by a low, steady hiss. It wasn't coming from the radio yet. It was coming from the air itself. He felt a prickly, electric sensation at the base of his neck. It was cold, like 1,000 tiny needles, and it began to crawl up his spine, hair by hair. The hissing grew louder, a deafening roar of white noise that seemed to vibrate the very glass of his windshield. The prickling reached his skull. He let out a wordless scream and twisted the key one last time with everything he had. The engine roared to life, the headlights cutting through the oppressive dark. Kenji didn't wait. He slammed it into gear and tore out of the lot, his tires screaming against the asphalt. He drove for miles, the speedometer climbing. He felt a wave of relief wash over him as the apartment complex disappeared into the rear-view mirror. He was safe. He was out. But then he looked at the road. He had been driving for 20 minutes at 70 miles per hour, but the landscape hadn't changed. The same rusted guardrail, the same crooked telephone pole, the same flickering street lamp every 100 yards. He looked at his radio. He hadn't turned it on, but the display was glowing, a bright, cream-colored light. The hiss was back, low and intimate, whispering through the speakers. Kenji is still driving. The door didn't close because it was locked. It closed because the room was finished with him. And the static. The static doesn't stop just because you leave the building. It lingers in the wires, hums in the air, seeps into the space between your own heartbeats. Poor Kenji. He thinks he escaped Apartment 0, thinks this is where his story ends. It isn't. He hasn't left Unit 0. Not really. Out here, the road is just another frequency, stretching endlessly into the dark. Every mile, every turn, every flicker of passing light, just part of the same broadcast. There is no outside. There is no silence. There is only the static. And no one escapes the static. I'm Silas Thorne. Keep your eyes on the road. And for heaven's sake, don't listen to the hiss. You're drifting through the dead air of 104.9, the frequency. Don't bother reaching for the dial. We're already inside.